Proper 16 and I'll come back to order.
All right, let's go ahead and set forth our appearances for the record.
Will count for plaintiffs.
Teddy Park for plaintiff, Your Honor.
Robert Eglett for the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Nancy Federico for the plaintiff, Your Honor. Brianna Switzler for plaintiffs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Eric Pepperman on behalf of plaintiff.
Brad Johnson, Tyler Watts, and Michael Esposito, and Eric Freeman on behalf of the defendants, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. As far as, I guess we're going to continue on with plaintiff's case in chief, is that correct?
No, Your Honor, I think we have the defense hepatologist now.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right?
but that's our case in chief.
Oh, yeah, Your Honor, for the record, we'd rest.
All right.
Your Honor, may I approach for a brief moment?
Yes, you can.
You got it? Thank you.
It hit me about 2 weeks ago. All right.
Okay, I'm going to grab myself.
So I guess at this time, the defense is calling this next witness, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Henry Lin
Okay.
via Zoom.
Via Zoom? Okay, it's via Zoom. You ready, man?
Okay, there he is.
Can we see him? Because we need to see him there.
We'll
Can you?
limited to just this hands issue.
That's good.
Sir, may I have you unmute? Press *6 to unmute. And raise your right hand, please. You do solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May I have you state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, it's Henry Lin, Henry, Lin is Lin.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Lin, can you hear me fine?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, great. If you could speak up, you're a little bit muted. I want to make sure you come in loud and clear.
All right, how is this? I turned up the volume. Is it better?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I know you wanted to be here in person, but you had some scheduling conflicts, and we were able to accommodate you by Zoom. I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yes, thank you for the flexibility. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of things up and down here over the past few weeks, so glad we could make it work. Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, sir. My name is Henry Lin. I'm a pediatric hepatologist and gastroenterologist. And when I say hepatologist, I'm a transplant hepatologist. I'm board certified. I work at academic medical center here in the state of Oregon, where my responsibilities include being the primary and only hepatologist in the state of Oregon, and I take care of children with liver diseases. And I'm also responsible for overseeing and leading our team of pediatric gastroenterologists and hepatologists.
Okay, so you work in the medical field and also in the academic field.
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Do you do any research as part of that work?
I do. As part of the academic field, research is part of the job description. My research is centered on primarily clinical liver disease and understanding what's the natural history or progression of liver disease, understanding what are things that we can do to help manage liver disease, and looking at factors that impact outcomes in liver disease in children.
Okay. Have you published any articles regarding pediatric liver care?
Yes, I have. That's a large portion of my peer-reviewed publications are in the realm of pediatric liver disease.
Okay. You mentioned those articles are peer-reviewed. Can you explain what that means?
Yes, sir. So peer review means that a group of your peers or colleagues, it depends on the journal you submit to, but for liver disease journals, they're usually pediatricians, in particular pediatricians with especially expertise in liver disease. They review the articles and make sure that the research is sound, that you're not making any unsound judgments or that there's not any bias in it. And really what they're saying is, the research that you conducted as a effectiveness. on his behalf and say that this is good information and should be shared with the public.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. You studied plaintiff Abraham Oliveira's medical records in this case, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. You've also reviewed his deposition and trial testimony from last week?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Did Mr. Oliveira receive appropriate and timely care?
Yes, sir, based on all the records I reviewed, he received timely and appropriate care.
Generally, overall, what did you take from his trial testimony?
From his trial testimony, it's clear he came in sick with symptoms and had elevated liver enzymes and was in the hospital for 4 days. And each day while he was in the hospital, it seemed like in the review records and testimony that he was getting better, and that at the time of discharge home from the hospital, that he was back to his normal self and doing quite well at that point in time.
Okay. Do you remember him testifying that he was feeling normal again on that final day in the hospital?
Yes, sir, I read that in the transcript.
Okay. Did you review Dr. Hudson's trial testimony?
Yes, sir, I did.
Now, Dr. Hudson testified that Mr. Oliveira suffered an acute liver injury in November of 2020. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, sir, I do agree with his assessment.
Now, the jury's heard a lot about the differences between acute liver injury versus acute liver failure. Can you explain the differences in the terms?
Yes, sir. And the difference is in the term injury versus failure. In acute liver injury, the liver is irritated. It could be inflamed, it could be irritated. It doesn't necessarily tell you what the underlying cause is causing the irritation. That says that the liver is angry, but it's still functioning. You can have acute liver injury without any impact of function. If it starts impacting your liver function, that's when you get into the acute liver failure definition. In either case, for acute liver failure, it also has the definition of occurring in someone who hasn't previously had any known underlying liver condition.
Okay. So in this case, Mr. Oliveira had a liver injury, but he did not have a liver failure.
Yes, sir. In review of the records, and well, as you mentioned, Dr. Hudson's testimony, he had an acute liver injury based on the fact that his liver enzymes, in particular the AST and ALT, were elevated in the triple digits. But based on the medical records, he did not have any signs of encephalopathy, which is usually one of the key things we look for to say, to make that differentiation to say is the liver functioning or not.
Okay, so he suffered a liver injury, but his liver function was not impacted?
Yeah, in review of all the records, that seems to be the case. The liver has many different functions out there, and encephalopathy is one of those clinical signs that you look for to say, if the liver is functioning, you will develop encephalopathy or start developing confusion and other signs. In the absence of that, it means acute liver, it seems to suggest that the liver is functioning. One of the other things that can be a marker of liver function is the INR. The INR is a clotting time, is a measure of clotting time. And the reason why that's a sign of liver function is because your liver makes a clotting factor that allows the blood to clot. And if your liver isn't functioning, that could cause the INR to be elevated. Now, the challenging part about using the INR as a solo marker of liver function is that there's many other causes of why the INR could be elevated. So you really need to look at the whole picture, and not only with the INR, but also with encephalopathy and other signs of liver failure, which in review of his records, I agree with what is basically referred to as that Mr. Bonnar has an acute liver injury.
Okay. What were the symptoms of liver injury that Mr. Oliveira expressed?
He expressed that he had feeling not well for a few days beforehand, had some belly pain and nausea, and wasn't eating. I don't recall if he was actually vomiting at the time, but usually those are the primary symptoms. I should say usually those are the primary symptoms I recall reading about.
Okay. Can we pull up Exhibit 390, page 8? This has already been admitted. Okay, if you could bold that part at the top. Now this, the date is November 6, 20. That's the date he was admitted to the hospital?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it says there, he was alert, tired, and no encephalopathy. What does that tell you?
Yeah, that tells me that, he's tired, which I imagine comes with being sick, but the fact that he's alert and with no encephalopathy tells me that the clinician didn't see any signs that were concerning of any changes in his thinking or his meditation. And really, with no encephalopathy, what they're signaling is, they're not worried about the liver function at that point in time.
Okay. So was he alert and oriented when he was admitted to the hospital?
Yes, sir, that's what the review record says. Yes, sir.
Okay. Did Mr. Oliveira ever have a biopsy?
No, he did not. Not from what I saw.
Okay. Did he ever need an evaluation from a liver transplant center?
I did not see one, so no, he did not, sir.
What did you find in your study of Mr. Oliveira's hospital records and lab results?
He was admitted for 4 days in the hospital. He came in being ill, and that on admission he had the elevated liver enzymes and the INR, as you see there in the exhibit. And over the course of his stay, each day, he got progressively better, both from a blood test standpoint, and for the AST, ALT, and the INR, as well as with how he was feeling. A few things to point out is he came in with that INR of 2.9, and he received vitamin K, and by the next day, the INR had significantly decreased, which is a very reassuring sign. And, like I mentioned, his AST, ALT liver numbers need to improve each day, and by the time he was discharged, he was back to his baseline and feeling well.
What's the significance of a rapid change in INR levels from being high to returning normal essentially overnight?
Like you mentioned a little bit ago, the INR is a measure of how your body is body, and we use it as a de facto measure of liver function. And so whenever someone comes in with a high INR, one of the first things that I'm looking for as a liver doctor is to say, is that high INR because the liver is not functioning, or is it because of something else? In particular, one thing we do is to give vitamin K to children with an elevated INR, because vitamin K is needed for your liver to make the clotting factors for your blood to clot. And if you make the clotting factors and your blood clots appropriately, the INR should drop down and normalize pretty quickly. The fact that he received vitamin K and his INR return dropped down pretty quickly within, after a day, tells me that most likely his INR was elevated because of a vitamin K deficiency and not a reflection of the liver not functioning. And I think that's corroborated by the clinical exams of the providers who prepared them in the hospital, where they repeatedly mentioned no encephalopathy. So I think those two hand in hand tell me with that INR dropping rapidly, as you mentioned, is it most likely due to a vitamin K deficiency. The other way to think of it is, if your liver wasn't functioning, no matter how much vitamin K I give you, the liver is still going to be unable to make the clotting factors. So the fact that the body was able to take the vitamin K and then make clotting factors and then all the INR drop, to me that's actually three things the liver actually functioning quite well.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Doctor. Can we pull up Exhibit 390, page 9? Again, these have all been previously admitted. Okay. If you go up to the top there, okay, this is November 8th, the third day of his hospital stay. If you look down under comments there at the bottom, no acute events overnight, walking around the unit, no encephalopathy. Did you review these records, doctor?
Yes, sir, I did.
What's the significance of noting this, like walking around the unit?
I think that goes, again, in hand with the no encephalopathy comment, saying that he's meditating appropriately, behaving appropriately, there's no concern for confusion, and the team feels safe having him walk around and walk around presumably without too much oversight. And so I think that's a good thing, saying that he's stably recovering.
And that's good news, right, doctor?
Yes, sir.
Can we pull up Exhibit 390, page 10, please, Robin? Okay, this is, go down to the bottom, 11.9. This was, did I get the right one? Okay, there we go. This one here on discharge, all labs improving, patient at baseline, tolerating a regular diet, and up and out of bed. What does patient at baseline mean?
Yeah, that's the subjective term, but in general, when we use that, it means the patient's return back to their normal. Between that and a review of transcripts from Dr. Oliver's trial test, that's doing good, normal, and also is baseline. So again, I think that's a very reassuring sign as well.
Well, what does this discharge note, what does it mean to you?
It means that, he's doing better. They tell me that, labs are improving. They haven't been normalized. So, the labs are still maybe a little bit elevated, but clinically he's doing quite well and he's well on his way to recovery. He's tolerating regular diet. So, he came in with consciousness and belly pain, and now it seems like that's no longer the case. I believe, on that next page, it says they were followed as an outpatient, which means, compared to the reason why you submitted, if the providers feel that you're safe to go home, that usually tells us that you're doing much better.
Okay. What are your opinions as to Mr. Oliveira's recovery?
I believe he's fully recovered from his acute liver injury, and he's doing quite well. In the record I reviewed, I believe a little over a month later, or not even a month later, his liver numbers had totally normalized, and I don't believe I've seen any additional follow-up, both from a medical standpoint or from a blood draw standpoint. So I guess I should say I didn't see follow-up in clinic or any labs otherwise that would suggest otherwise.
Okay. Now, the jury has heard a lot about the importance of ALT and AST. Can you explain what the importance of these tests and levels are?
Yes, sir. So the AST and ALT, they're the markers of liver irritation. And so whenever those numbers are high, it tells me something is irritating the liver, whether it's something causing inflammation or other types of irritation. It doesn't really tell me what, but it tells me that the liver is irritated. And so once those numbers normalize, usually what that tells you is that the liver is no longer actively inflamed or injured. And really, I think what it means is, for all intents and purposes, is that the liver has recovered from that acute injury.
Okay. Can we pull up Exhibit 390, page 14, please, Robin? Okay, down there toward the bottom on assessment and plan. Okay. You see there, doctor, where it says LFTs are now normal and plaintiff is asymptomatic. So the LFT, that means liver function tests?
Yes, sir, that's correct. That includes the AST and the ALT.
Okay. And if they're normal, does that mean the AST and ALT are normal?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. And that, again, means that there's no longer any injury or inflammation and the liver is recovered?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You see there it has capital A, S, and then small x. What does that mean?
I believe that's an abbreviation for asymptomatic. And that would tell me that he's doing quite well and has no symptoms that would make me worried about liver injury, in particular, that he's not tired or fatigued or jaundiced.
Okay, and it's the last part of that is mother states he has no other complaints. Is that another good sign?
Yes, sir. I mean, I would generally, when that's written down, it tells us that, there's no other issues that have been brought up in that clinic visit.
Okay, and this was a follow-up that was December 2nd of 2020?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that's less than 30 days from the time he went to the hospital to his condition resolving?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. You can take that down, Robin. Do you have any opinions as to Mr. Oliveira's future or future care needs?
Yes, sir. I mean, in general, in the review of my records, and I believe even in that last document that you just showed, when he's recovered, but really, and with no complications, so all very good things. But even in the last specialist notice that, with no follow-up necessary, I believe that's what that said, and I agree with that. I mean, the records show that he's recovered from an acute liver injury. He's doing well. His normalization of his AST and ALT, and in the records that were provided to me that I saw, it does not seem like he's had any follow-up with any other physicians, clinicians, or even in his lab test, which would reflect that, his clinician's recommendation that he's recovered and doing quite well and doesn't need follow-up.
Okay, and that was in his medical records, but I believe would you say the plaintiff's own conduct meets those record or those comments about being resolved and no future care needed?
Yes, sir. A review of his trial testimony transcripts, it seems like he's doing quite well and has said that he hasn't had any follow-up needed. And if anything, I seem to recall there's a statement of a discussion about weightlifting, a conversation with his siblings, and again, it seems like he's doing quite well. So I would agree with that. Yes, sir.
And is it your understanding that he hasn't had any type of medical care since December 2 of 2020?
Yes, sir. I have not seen any other care, and also I believe in his testimony he's the same as well.
Okay. Dr. Hudson testified that Mr. Oliveira has a permanent liver injury. What is your opinions on that?
I believe that's speculation. And when you talk about liver injury and permanency, the way I think of it is what you're referring to is really scar tissue or fibrosis, and in particular irreversible scar tissue, which is cirrhosis. But you need a liver biopsy to be able to accurately assess fibrosis, and he has not had a liver biopsy, and so I believe that's speculation.
Is it your opinion that more likely than not, Mr. Oliveira has no liver scarring or fibrosis?
Yes, sir, that is my opinion. He had an acute liver injury, and while the AST and ALT were elevated, they normalized within a month as we reviewed, and there's really no other signs on his exam or his medical records that tell me that he's had any evidence of ongoing liver injury for him or scar tissue.
Is an injury, excuse me, is an injury to a pediatric liver reversible?
In general, a lot of injuries are. What's interesting about the liver is the liver is the only organ that can regenerate and recover. And so if you typically, if the liver gets injured for any reason, if you're able to identify the underlying cause of the injury and remove it, as long as you haven't progressed to cirrhosis or the irreversible scar tissue, that injury should reverse. And I should also say, right, that not to confound the two terms, when we're saying injury or irritation, or inflammation, the ASD, ALT are markers of irritation or inflammation. Long-term inflammation leads to scar tissue or fibrosis. When we use the term acute liver injury or acute hepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver, that's just a medical term saying the liver was irritated, inflamed, but doesn't really distill down to is there scar tissue or is there permanence of injury. When we talk about permanence of liver injury or function, we're really talking about scar tissue or fibrosis, of which I didn't see any mention of fibrosis in the exams that you had, and also the clinicians that took care of him really didn't seem to think that that was a concern either, based off of his physical thing.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hudson also recommended future medical monitoring. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yes, sir. In general, I would go back to what his own subspecialist said at the time of follow-up, which was no additional follow-up is needed. My own specialist opinion as a pediatric hepatologist is, if you have an acute liver injury and your liver numbers resolved and you're back to baseline and acting well, then no follow-up is really needed. And I think that's been reflected by Mr. Oliveira himself in his testimony.
Okay. In addition, does it seem the lack of any medical visits since December of 2020 indicate to you that Mr. Oliveira and his family doesn't think future medical monitoring is necessary either?
Well, they have not pursued or he hasn't been seen by a physician or a clinician. And so I would suggest that if he's doing well, then it seems like they're not feeling that he needs any additional monitoring.
Okay. Is Dr. Hudson a pediatric hepatologist?
No, sir.
Okay, and that is one of your specialties?
Yes, sir, that is my specialty.
Okay. Are all of your opinions expressed today given to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Lin. And I apologize I didn't say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Dr. Lin. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Dr. Lin, I want to start on a couple things that I think we can agree on. We can agree that real water had hydrazine, rocket fuel in it, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we can agree that hydrazine is a known liver toxin, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we can agree that hydrazine can cause permanent injury to someone's liver, correct?
Yes, sir, it can.
Yes, and we can also agree that hydrazine can even cause death of someone who consumes it.
Yes, sir, it can.
And we also know that hydrazine can result in liver transplants, correct?
Yes, sir. I believe there are instances out there where people have had liver failure from hydrogen and need a liver transplant.
And you were only asked to testify about Abraham, correct?
Yes, sir. I'm a pediatric hepatologist.
And well, I just want to establish, you're not offering any opinions about any of the other plaintiffs in this case, are you?
No, sir. I only reviewed Mr. Oliveira's records, sir.
You testified about a difference between acute liver injury and acute liver failure. Isn't it true that the treating physicians that you're speaking of about Abraham, they diagnosed Abraham with acute liver failure?
I'm not fully sure. What I would say is when Abraham presented, with elevated liver enzyme and elevated IR, acute liver failure is on that differential. It's something that you absolutely have to be worried about, when you have high AST, ALT, and high IR. Like I mentioned, one of the first things we do as a hepatologist is to see are there other reasons for that IR to be elevated. And so I think when he first presented, I believe it was acute liver failure on the differential. But with it resolving so quickly, it's most likely that he had an acute liver injury. The liver really wasn't failing for the reasons I mentioned beforehand, which is he received vitamin K and his IR improved. And if your liver's not functioning, no amount of vitamin K that it gives you will help the liver, will help the IR improve.
Shane, can you please pull up Exhibit 390, page 4? This is the medical records for Abraham Olvera, and under diagnosis, assessment, and plan, it says liver failure, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you prepared a report in this case containing your opinions. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And in your report, when discussing the INR, you note that the improvement in his INR could reflect a natural history of acute liver failure, correct?
Yes, sir, and I don't say it could also be a reflection of the vitamin K deficiency as well. I think the challenging part in this case is, as a clinician, when you see someone in that moment, absolutely without a doubt, when Mr. Oliveira presented, there's absolutely concern of acute liver failure. And whether or not liver failure is, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to go back to definitively say that. It's based off of how you interpret the data. But to me, the important part is, his liver recovered. Whether or not you call it failure or injury, his ALT recovered, his iron recovered, and he's doing well. And so, I think you ask many different physicians, you'll get different questions, different answers on does he or did not have acute liver failure.
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Lin, but the clinicians who evaluated Abraham diagnosed him with liver failure, true?
At that point in time, yes, sir.
Now, you are coming in here, and one of the things that you rely on to conclude that Abraham is better is that he had normal ALTs and ASTs the last time they were tested, correct?
Yes, sir, and as well as the INR, yes, sir.
Isn't it true that you can have normal ASTs and ALTs and still have liver injuries?
You can, but then I would also assume that other labs, such as the INR, would also be elevated, which I did not see evidence of that in my review records.
In fact, people with cirrhosis can have normal ASTs and ALTs, correct?
That is correct, but in that same example, I would also expect the INR to be elevated or have other signs, other liver enzymes being elevated, which again, in the review of records available, we did not see that.
Shane, can we please pull up Exhibit 423? Dr. Lynn, Exhibit 423 is the biopsy slide for the 22-month-old Severin Morales. You are familiar with Severin Morales, correct?
Yes, sir, I reviewed that case long ago for a different trial.
And Dr. Lynn, I just want to ask you, did you review Dr. Datnow's trial testimony in this case?
Yes, sir, I guess I'm not sure how that's relevant to control of error.
Well, Dr. Datnow testified that he found cirrhosis in Severin's slides, correct?
Yes, sir.
And by the way, isn't it true that you rely on a pathologist like Dr. Datnow to read biopsy slides?
Yes, sir, if it's determined that you need a liver biopsy, yes, sir.
Okay. And did you review Dr. Robbins' trial testimony in this case?
I do not recall that, sir.
Okay. So Dr. Robin did not offer any opinions on Severin Morales' slide, did he?
You know, I honestly, that was so long ago, I do not remember.
Getting back to Severin Morales' slide, you recall, and if you can see it on the screen, the circular blue is what Dr. Datnow identified as a cirrhotic nodule, correct?
Yes, sir, that looks like it could be a cirrhotic nodule, yes, sir.
And you would agree with me that there's no doubt.
Objection, Your Honor, this is well beyond the scope of Dr. Lynn's opinions.
Oh my God, can we approach, I just got no doubt.
Your Honor.
Thank you.
Shane, can we pull the slide back up, please? So, Dr. Lynn, getting back to it, there is no doubt that the cirrhosis to this 22-month-old baby was caused by hydrazine in real water, correct?
Yes, sir, I believe that's what was concluded.
And so even though the Morales baby has cirrhosis caused by hydrazine, isn't it true that he had normal ASTs and ALTs?
From what I recall, that is correct.
And he had normal INR, correct?
Yeah, I honestly don't recall that. I just don't remember, it's so long ago.
You'd agree that the Morales baby is not all better, correct?
Can you explain to me what you mean by all better?
Well, he has cirrhosis, right? You wouldn't call someone with cirrhosis all better, would you?
Yes, and we would agree on that, yes, sir.
And cirrhosis is stage 4 liver disease, the most advanced stage of 1 to 4 scale, correct?
Of scar tissue, yes, sir.
So Abraham could have cirrhosis and have normal ASTs and ALTs, isn't that right?
In theory, anyone could have cirrhosis with a normal AST, ALT, but you have to look at the entire picture, including other lab ultrasound findings, how the patient is doing. And so I think each patient is their own individual. And again, in review of my records of Abraham, I don't see any findings that make me concerned of any ongoing liver disease.
You haven't seen any records from Abraham since December 2020, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what was provided to me, sir.
So normal ASTs and ALTs do not preclude the possibility that Abraham has cirrhosis, correct?
In isolation, that's the true statement, yes, sir.
Thank you. In your report, you discussed the prognosis of drug-induced liver injury, correct?
Yes, sir.
You write, the prognosis of DILI typically depends on the type of drug-induced liver injury, correct?
Yes, sir.
You write, typically, removal of the drug results in DILI, quote, in DILI, factors that have been associated with a poorer prognosis include the presence of pre-existing liver disease, the development of acute liver failure secondary to select medications, and the development of jaundice with the bilirubin twice the upper limit of normal, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what the literature says in terms of, factors that put you at risk for prognosis. But every patient is unique, and we have to look at the patient themselves as well.
And you have to look at the toxin, don't you?
Yes, sir, you have to look at the entire picture, and the most important is how is the patient doing.
The toxin makes a difference, true?
They can, yes, sir.
Because some toxins are associated with poorer prognosis, your words, correct?
Yes, they can be associated with poor prognosis compared to other toxins, yes, sir.
And that's because DILI can be caused by a wide variety of substances, correct?
Yeah, and any drug that can injure the liver, there's many out there, yes, sir.
And not all DILI is the same, right?
Not all drugs impact the liver the same, and each individual's reaction to the drug may also be different as well.
Okay. So we know the toxin in this case is hydrazine, or rocket fuel, correct?
It's hydrazine, yes, sir.
Okay. So your opinion shouldn't be based on some vague drug, they should be based on hydrazine, correct?
It's based on hydrazine, it's based on how the patient is doing as well.
Okay. What literature did you look at involving hydrazine toxicity?
There's not a lot of literature out there.
Can you identify any literature that you went and looked at that shows that someone can pour hydrazine on their liver and it magically regenerates?
Sir, I believe what you're referring to is there's one case series out there, which I'm not sure how that's fully germane. Yes, there's one case series that I've read that talks about exposure to, I believe in particular, real water was the topic, and in children. But again, as with everything, you have to look at the patient and also how they're reacting.
So, you agree that hydrazine could cause permanent liver injury to some people that drink it, correct?
Well, yes, sir.
And you agree that Abraham could possibly have permanent liver injury from real water, true?
No, I do not agree with that statement. Based on the records I reviewed and how he's doing, it seems that that's more likely than not the case.
Well, you agree that hydrazine can cause permanent liver injury. We saw it with Severin Morales, right?
I'm not sure how one person's case is relevant to this, but yes, it can cause injury.
Okay, so it can cause cirrhosis, cirrhotic nodules in a baby who drank it for what? A couple weeks?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I don't actually recall how long that was. That seems to be a different
So-
thing that you're asking about right now.
It is possible that drinking hydrazine can cause permanent liver injury and even death, correct?
Yes, sir, we've seen that.
And I believe that you testified earlier that the only way that you, Dr. Lin, can determine with 100% certainty that Abraham does not have a permanent liver injury would be to do a biopsy, correct?
Yes, sir, if you're defining permanent liver injury as scar tissue fibrosis and in particular cirrhosis, a liver biopsy is indicated, and based on the review of my review of the record, the liver biopsy wasn't deemed necessary by his treating providers. And so I think it's speculation to say he has permanent liver injury, yes or no. All I can tell you is he's clinically doing better in review of the record and is doing quite well by what's available to us.
Dr. Lin, Abraham's treating physicians had no idea that he drank rocket fuel, did they?
I do not know the answer to that.
Do you know what they would have done had they known that he was exposed to the specific toxin hydrazine?
I don't want to speculate on what they would or wouldn't have done, but I can tell you, review my record, they provided exemplary care.
The only way to determine whether Abraham has permanent liver injury is to do a biopsy, correct?
Yes, sir, but that was also what his.
Well, it's a yes or no question, Dr. Lynn. You need to do a biopsy to confirm that, right?
You need to do a biopsy to confirm if you have scar tissue, yes, sir.
And you need to stick a biopsy needle in Abraham and tear out a piece of his liver and look at it, correct?
If you're talking about a biopsy process, yes, that's the biopsy. If you get a sample of liver, you sometimes can see cirrhotic nodules on ultrasound as well, which you've had one ultrasound that did not show cirrhotic nodules.
You would not recommend a biopsy on Abraham at this time, true?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, he recovered and doing quite well.
And since we do not have a biopsy, you cannot say that Abraham does not have cirrhosis or permanent liver injury, correct?
I can say we can't assess his scar tissue. What I can also tell you is, as I mentioned just a moment ago, that on the one ultrasound he's had, he has fatal nodes and he's cirrhotic nodules.
That's a fair point, Dr. Lynn. So while we don't have a biopsy, we do have some scientific literature and available information on the consequences of pouring rocket fuel on the human liver in both adults and children, correct?
Yeah, there's some literature out there, yes, sir.
So Shane, can we pull up Exhibit 106, please? Dr. Lynn, this is the article, the published article, Hydrazine Toxicity in the Human, Report of a Fatal Case. You've reviewed this article before, haven't you?
Yes, for a prior trial, I've not looked at this in quite some time, but yes.
And this article reports a case where moderate exposure to hydrazine resulted in someone's death, correct?
I don't fully remember that. I have to highlight where you're referring to, but sure, I would agree with it if it's written there.
And you're not aware of any published literature that says consuming hydrazine, after consuming hydrazine, the liver magically regenerates and you have no problem, correct?
Well, I don't think there's any literature on that. That's correct.
We have some other literature, including the MMWR, don't we? Dr. Lynn, you've reviewed the MMWR, haven't you?
Yes, again, for prior cases, but not to this particular case.
This one reports of another woman who consumed real water, including hydrazine, died as a result, right?
This one you highlighted diet, and not to be difficult, but in the previous one, I didn't actually see anything that said to my diet. I might have missed it, but it wasn't highlighted.
Okay, now does this refresh your recollection that hydrazine killed at least this woman? Hydrazine in real water?
I never said that I never disputed that it could lead to death when you asked me. I said yes, sir, because we've seen reports like that.
And then this article also references the 5 babies, including the Morales baby. Isn't that right, Dr. Lynn?
So, yes, I mean, it does say are from the 5 children, but I think that's what you're referring to.
And all 5 of those children suffered acute liver failure, correct?
Yeah, I really don't recall. It's been a long time since I read this article.
Okay. You didn't bother looking at this and preparing your opinions related to Abraham in this case?
No, I reviewed his record, and his record, how, records plus my experience. That's the key things I looked at.
And we already talked about the Morales baby's biopsy report, which shows cirrhosis. What about Exhibit 10, the Loma Linda article? Did you review this article in preparation for giving your opinions in this case?
Yeah, again, it's a long time ago that that's stored away and, as part of things that I've reviewed. And yes, like you mentioned, right, it can cause liver injury, sometimes to complete a transplant, and that's requiring transplant. And like you mentioned in the article before, it can lead to death. These are all things that we've seen with specifically real water. But, I reviewed the case that was presented to me in which, Ms. Oliveira had an acute liver injury and subsequently recovered and seems to be doing quite well.
Well, the literature, well, strike that. This article reviewed 4 people who drank real water containing hydrazine and had liver failure, correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall that they did biopsies of these 4 individuals?
Yeah, it says it there, yes.
And 75% of the patients had fibrosis, correct?
In this article, I believe so, if that's what it says. Yeah.
And one of them had progressed to bridging fibrosis, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the 3 cases where they found fibrosis, they took the liver biopsy 1 month after presentation, correct?
I recall, but if that's what this article says, then yes, absolutely.
And the only one where they didn't document fibrosis, that was taken, the liver biopsy was taken 5 days after presentation, correct?
Sure, I have to look at it, but you clearly looked at this more recently than me, so I will take your word for it.
You didn't look at this before developing your opinions on Abraham, correct?
Well, no, I looked at it, sir, but when I look at literature, what one has to keep in mind as a clinician is not only you have to look at the patient, you also have to ask yourself, when literature is presented, why are they presenting it? Is it because, in this case, very acutely, we need to know that real water is toxic and can injure the liver? Absolutely. But what's not actually, what one doesn't know is how many other patients drank real water, maybe had a liver biopsy, maybe didn't, and they didn't report it. It's not reported in the literature. We're really limited by just what is. A lot of times the literature is out there to give us that information and say, hey, be aware that this is happening, but also use your own clinical judgment to really look and treat the patient in front of you. So I don't think anyone can say this without speculating. What's the percentage that might give you fibrosis or not fibrosis, because I don't think anyone has a good sense of how many patients who drank real water actually had a liver biopsy.
Well, this is available, published literature, and information on the exact same toxin that Abraham was exposed to, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And don't you think it's important to look to see if any of these patients who we see have fibrosis, who have cirrhosis, who have died, what their clinical presentation was to compare to Abraham's before making an opinion that he's all better?
Yes, sir, I did. I've reviewed them in the past. I haven't reviewed them in detail in the past year or so. But you take that, and on top of that, you also have to review how other people have responded to other conditions as well.
Well, you just look at...
You need to use all of your experience. As a clinician, I look at my experience and say, how are people doing? And I think the important part to keep in mind is, like I mentioned, it's published data, but you have to remember it's published data for a reason. If a patient is doing well, regardless of if it's toxin A, B, or C, oftentimes that's not something that people publish to say, hey, someone recovered. And so it's not saying that that's the case for everyone. I mean, people absolutely we've seen were injured and harmed by real water. It impacts your liver. No one is disputing that. I was asked to review Mr. Oliveira's case, and in the records available, based on my experience as well as things that I've reviewed, including the articles that you've shown, my opinion still stands the same. Is that he's recovered and is doing quite well.
Well, isn't it true that Severin Morales was discharged from the hospital?
Sure, I don't see how that's germane to this conversation.
Isn't it true that Severin Morales had normal ALT and ASTs?
Yes, sir, we've established that already.
Isn't it true that Severin Morales is back in school and doing okay?
You know, I don't remember honestly because it's been a while since that trial.
Assuming it's true, that doesn't mean that Severin Morales doesn't have cirrhosis on his liver, correct? From hydrazine.
Sure, but it's a different patient. And you're extrapolating from one patient to another.
It doesn't mean that Severin Morales isn't going to have problems in the future related to his cirrhosis, is he? Or isn't that true?
Sure, I would not want to speculate on his prognosis. It's a totally different case.
And you would agree that Severin Morales should be followed and medically monitored to see if there are any problems that come up in the future, correct?
Oh, yes, sir, that's why I testified. I agree with that because we had a liver biopsy that was deemed necessary to have a biopsy that showed fibrosis or cirrhosis, and Mr. Rivera doesn't have that. And so it's hard for me to really compare the two. I mean, he didn't have a liver biopsy, so I'm trying to answer your questions, but I'm struggling a little bit to see the connection.
Well, based on the scientific literature and the available information that we know, hydrazine can cause cirrhosis, correct?
Yes, it can.
Can cause fibrosis, correct?
Yes, it can. We've seen that in the literature, yes, sir.
It can cause regenerative nodules, correct?
Yes, sir, we've seen that as well.
It can cause steatosis, correct?
Yes, sir.
It can cause hepatocyte necrosis, correct?
Yes, sir.
It can lead to liver transplant, correct?
It can lead to liver transplant if you have liver failure, yes, sir.
And it can even lead to death, can it?
You showed that one case, yes, sir.
Well, we know multiple people who died, including one from hydrazine in real water, don't we?
I'm not sure what are you referring to that article, sir?
Yes.
Sure, so what, yes, sir.
Isn't it true that there is no scientific literature studying people who consumed hydrazine that suggests that the liver can magically repair itself as if no damage ever occurred?
I haven't seen that article, but that's true of many things that you can make a statement about that with real water.
Without a biopsy and with no scientific literature, you cannot say that Abraham has not suffered a permanent injury for which he will need medical care in the future, correct?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Without a biopsy and with no scientific literature, you cannot say that Abraham has not suffered a permanent injury for which he will need medical care in the future, correct?
No, sir, I don't agree with that.
Suffering a sudden acute liver failure with no known etiology is traumatic for a child. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, yes, sir, absolutely.
Acute liver failure can cause cognitive deficiencies. True?
Yes, sir, it can.
I believe in your report, you know that data from the PALF study group report that long-term pediatric acute liver failure survivors, including both those who survived with their native liver or those who have received a liver transplant, demonstrated an average intelligence quotient and visual spatial ability, but impairments in motor skills, attention, executive function, health-related quality of life, and fatigue were noted. Correct?
Yes, sir, yes.
Did you review Dr. Sand's testimony in this case?
I don't believe I was provided that, yes, sir.
Did you review his report?
I was not provided that, yes, sir.
Dr. Sands is plaintiff's expert neuropsychologist, and Shane, can you put up Exhibit 1206? So his findings for Abraham include impaired fine motor skills, impaired executive function, PTSD, and impaired attention and memory. Aren't those the exact impairments that are listed in your report as associated with long-term pediatric acute liver failure survivors?
Objection, speculation.
Report, right?
It's not, he said he hasn't seen this exhibit.
Well, I'm showing him and asking if it's the same that's in his report.
It's in his report. The same in his report. That's what I thought. What other question? Repeat that.
Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Lynn. Aren't Dr. Sands' findings, as I'm showing you on this exhibit, this admitted exhibit, the exact same things that are listed in your report as associated with long-term pediatric acute liver failure survivors?
Yes, sir, they are. You read it, and you're reading this slide to me, yes, sir.
So you would agree that it's reasonable to provide future psychological and cognitive evaluations and services to Abraham, wouldn't you?
Objection calls for speculation.
Yeah, I would, in general, yes, but I would qualify it with, in that study, they looked at, what you were doing before and how you were doing before and after, potentially. And the question is, with anyone, is how are you doing before this, right? Not knowing, what was going to what a Stephan had, 5 years ago, before acute liver failure. It's speculation to say, did he develop this or not? But if he indeed developed this as a result or as being associated with acute liver failure, yes, I would agree with your statement.
Fair enough. All we can say, Dr. Lynn, from your perspective, is the research shows that long-term pediatric acute liver failure survivors suffer from impairments in motor skills, attention, executive function, health-related quality of life, and fatigue. Correct?
Yes, compared to other people, but you also have to take that, as I just mentioned, into account of what was your baseline beforehand. So yes, sir, I agree with that because I wrote it.
And all we know is that Abraham consumed hydrazine and suffered acute liver failure, correct?
Sure, it's semantic, acute liver injury, acute liver failure, his liver was injured, yes.
And since that time, his testing by an expert neuropsychologist is showing the exact same impairments that are listed in your report, right?
Yes, sir, that's what you showed me.
Okay. You noted in your report that Abraham had an elevated bilirubin as well, correct?
Yeah, initially, yes, sir.
And that's one of the things that you associate with poor long-term prognosis, correct?
What do you mean when you say you associate with poor long-term? Are you referring to something wrote in my report?
On page 3 of your report, you say factors that have been associated with poor prognosis include elevated total bilirubin, correct?
Oh, yes, sir, that's because if your bilirubin is elevated for a long period of time, that's going to put more injury on the liver. So it's all qualified by how long it's been elevated, which I'm not sure that one particular piece is applicable to the total distance.
And producing an elevated bilirubin is a sign of liver failure, correct?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. And then fatigue is a sign of liver failure, correct?
I mean, if your liver is failing, you can have all those things, but many other causes can cause those symptoms. Blood findings.
testified about fibrosis in the liver and said that fibrosis can resolve, correct?
Yes, sir.
Fibrosis can also get worse, true?
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely.
And you mentioned that you place great emphasis on the steps taken by Abraham's treating physicians, correct?
Yes, sir, because when I review the results, I mean, those are steps that I can see myself taking in my own clinical practice. Yes, sir.
And you're not aware, you have no reason to believe that Abraham's treating physicians knew that he had ingested rocket fuel in real water at the time he was being treated, correct?
Yes, sir, I did. That's not in the record. But again, I think they treated him as they should for somebody constant with elevated liver enzymes and elevated INR, irrespective of the causes. If they treated him as the patient and sent off appropriate things to look for the cause.
You have no reason to believe that Abraham's treating physicians did literature research on hydrazine toxicity when they were treating him in 2020, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach?
Dr. Lin, you have no reason to believe that Abraham's treating physicians in 2020 did any literature research on the toxicity of hydrazine, correct?
Yes, sir, not one way or the other. I wasn't there. I see nothing to the contrary.
You have no reason to believe that they found the article we looked at in Exhibit 106 reporting the only case involving reporting a fatal case of exposure to hydrazine, correct?
Not that I know of. Again, you can speculate one way or another.
And the MMWR that we looked at, the Loma Linda report showing fibrosis in the majority of patients, the deaths, the regenerative nodules, the cirrhosis findings, no indication that any of that existed in 2020 when Abraham was being treated, correct?
Again, not to my knowledge, but that's just based on the records I've reviewed.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. I have no further questions.
Correct.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Just a few additional, questions, Doctor. You're not disputing that Mr. Oliveira, his liver injury was caused by real water, are you?
Oh, no, sir, I am not.
Okay. And there was talk just here with Mr. Pepperman regarding hydrazine causing permanent liver injury, the need for a liver transplant, even death. But Mr. Oliveira didn't experience any of those.
Yes, sir, that's correct. In my reviewed records, and from what he said, he did quite well.
Okay, and then he talked about another patient who actually had a biopsy, was at a liver transplant center, and had pathologists review his slides. But in Mr. Oliveira's case, there wasn't any biopsy, transplant evaluation, and a pathologist wasn't involved with his care. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Now, they raised the question if hydrazine could cause a permanent injury. In your medical opinion, Mr. Oliveira did not suffer a permanent injury. That's your opinion, correct?
Yes, sir, that is my medical opinion after reviewing the available records to me.
Okay, and that's your opinion after the suggestion that there could be a permanent injury?
Yes, sir, that remains my opinion, is that he's doing quite well right now and does not have a permanent liver injury from what I've seen.
A biopsy is only ordered when there's a real concern of a serious injury, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, so, so the fact that there's no biopsy, would you agree that it's total speculation about the existence of a permanent injury?
Objection. Lacks foundation, false speculation.
I'll sustain, you can rephrase, sir, if you can.
Well, without a biopsy, in this case, with Mr. Oliveira, is there any reason to believe there's a permanent injury?
No, sir, that's not from my review.
Now, overall, based on your review of the medical records from Mr. Oliveira's treating physician and Mr. Oliveira's own testimony, is that he recovered in 2020, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Oliveira, is it your opinion that Mr. Oliveira is not in need of any future care for his liver?
Yes, sir, based on the records, that is my opinion, yes, sir.
Okay, in fact, he hasn't had any treatment at all in the last 4 years, isn't that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Have all your opinions that, expressed today been given to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lin.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Pepperly?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Lin, you said without a biopsy, you can't determine whether Abraham has permanent liver injury, correct?
Yes, sir, without a biopsy, you can't determine if he has any scar tissue. Yes, sir.
But you could look at scientific literature and the other available information, like what hydrazine from real water has done to other people, and you can draw inferences based on that information. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. You need to use that information and have that in mind, and then look at the patient in question to draw your own opinion. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Lin.
Anything else?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna release the doctor.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
No jury questions, right? No. Okay, who's gonna be the next witness?
May we approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Dr. Lin.
Thank you.
And it's my understanding the defense is calling their next witness to testify by video. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor. That it's Blaine Jones.
All right.
Two. Yeah. Those are the two. Succinct.
Tough crowd.
Smart. It's a tough crowd.
This one's all cleaned up.
Volume.
And when did you graduate from Boulder City?
2005.
And after graduating from high school, what'd you do?
You want to restart?
Take two.
And if you please tell the jury where you went to high school.
I went to Boulder City High School. I graduated from Boulder City High School, but also attended Del School in California.
Okay. And when did you graduate from Boulder City?
2005.
And after graduating from high school, what'd you do?
I started working for my father. A couple of different businesses that he had going on, different things he's done.
Who's your father?
Brett Jones.
And approximately when did you start working with the water?
I would say probably around 2008.
And when you first started working at Real Water, what kind of work did you do?
I first started working on the production line.
And what is that?
The producing a bulk water product that he was making.
And where was that?
In Las Vegas, Desert.
And did you start to progress through the company as you worked there?
Yeah, worked for a number of years at the company and did different positions that whatever was basically needed at the time throughout the years, filled that gap and made everything work as needed.
And what kind of company is it?
The bottle of water.
And what kind of water, what's your water?
Alkaline and negatively ionized.
And when you first started with the company, who made the concentrate?
John Harlow.
And who's John Harlow?
He's the inventor of the concentrate.
Okay. And did that change at any time?
During the course of the company, I was instructed and trained by him on how to do part of the process of making the concentrate. And he trained me. He was always kind of involved with it throughout the years, but it went from him solely doing it to then me taking over some of those.
So kind of an on-the-job training?
Yeah.
And about when was that approximately?
I would say 4 or 5 years into the company's life. So we just kind of started training.
So about 2012, that time frame?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Well, what are we looking at here?
That is a filtration, water filtration unit.
And what does it do?
It takes the municipal water from the tap, basically, and puts it through a series of filtration steps, mainly reverse osmosis, which is the one that takes out the majority of the most delicious things in the water.
So this is basically municipal water comes in on one side and then what happens?
That goes through all the different stages. You see the different tanks and filters that are on the unit there. Like I said, reverse osmosis, a couple different media filters, UV lights. There's an ozone addition to the water as well. And so basically at the end of it, it comes out and goes into a holding tank and it's filtered water.
All right, what are we looking at here, Glenn?
In the center of the frame there is the 5-gallon washing, filling, and capping machine.
And this is at the Henderson facility?
Correct.
Okay. And what's on the left-hand side of that screen?
That is a water tank that was used, I believe, for the actual mixing and making of the real water product.
So the water we come out of the filtration system would go into that tank or the other tank?
There was a holding tank, I think, behind the filling machine. You can't quite see here that where it would go into, and then it would go into that holding tank and then be pulled from the holding tank into that mixing tank, I guess is what it's called.
Okay, so we see page 2 is 0237. Again, what are we looking at here?
Different angle, the 5-gallon filling, washing, filling, capping machine on the right, and then you can see the tanks there. The middle one is one of the mixing tanks on the right that you can kind of barely see is the holding tank, and then another mixing tank on the far left.
Okay. Can we go to the third page of the 337, please? And now what do we see?
You can see the holding tank better, larger there on the left.
So the water comes out of the filtration system into that holding tank?
Correct.
And what are we looking at here, Mike?
The tree compartment tank.
And what was this used for?
Washing and sanitizing of different tools, things that are needed.
And can we take a look at what the market is at 246L, so it's been agreed or agreed to be admitted on it.
bathroom sink and then also a hand washing sink there on the left.
And the foreground, that's the full tank.
The holding tank area on the right, and then the two mixing tanks on the left.
Okay, and there's a ladder in the picture, what is that used for?
To be able to access the top of the mixing tanks.
And let's take a look at the last exhibit, or last photo, which would be 2461. What are we looking at there?
Just different angle with the three-part sink, hand washing sink there on the left, and then one of the mixing tanks there on the right.
So after the product is made, what is the machine right in front of us do?
The 5-gallon machine, so the empty bottles would be fed into the machine on the other side that's being shown. And they would go into a washing cycle, a sanitation cycle, and then come around and get filled and capped. That would be the flow of the bottles themselves. The water would be pumped from the mixing tanks over to the 5-gallon machine there. First go through a secondary UV light that you can see on the top of the 5-gallon machine. And then go into the filling heads of the machine, which would then go into the empty bottles and the wash and sanitize.
As part of the manufacture of well water, was the water sent to outside laboratories for testing?
Yeah.
Blaine, can you describe in very, very general terms what this is? This is a letter from 2017. What is this?
This is a letter from Silver State Analytical Laboratories here in the Vegas area, who the company used to do various testing, and as a third-party certified lab to do the testing.
And what were they testing?
The product.
The finished product?
Finished product.
How often were you doing testing?
They would do weekly testing, quarterly testing, yearly testing, and then another more comprehensive test every 4 years.
And so this particular one is from 2017?
Here's the deal.
And who's the base analytical?
Subcontractor for Silver State.
And what did they do for your water?
Same thing, so Silver State was the vendor that the company used. And then Case Analytical was who they sent the actual these tests out to. For whatever reason.
What's the time frame of this particular test?
Looks like it's July of 2018.
And what is this?
Another test from a different lab.
And when was this on?
Looks like it's November of 2019.
And again, what are they testing?
The finished product. I couldn't tell you, there's a number of different things they actually tested for, but the sample was of the finished product.
And let's see, over the last one, exhibit 2093, please. And what is exhibit 2093?
Another test from wet lab,
And what are they testing?
finished product.
At one point, did you become aware that real water has failed an NSF audit?
So they don't necessarily do a full pass-fail from my recollection. They give you, depending on how severe, I guess, the findings are. But for real water, in my recollection of the different audits that I've been through, we only ever had a few findings that needed to be corrected, corrective actions that needed to be done. But I want to say we were always in the 90% percentile of passing, I guess you could say.
And that audit is required by one of the vendors that real water sold to.
Correct.
The audit that real water did not pass, do you remember what happened?
I don't recall the specific points that were listed as not passing them.
Do you recall that one of the questions that the auditors had was that the House of trained employee had just left the company?
Yes.
What do you recall?
So we had, the company had an employee that was working, that was HACCP trained. She had been with the company for 4 or 5 years, I want to say, over the production area as well as quality control. And she resigned her position a few days prior to the audit. It's a surprise audit, you never know when the person's going to come in to actually do the audit. She resigned within a week of when the auditor showed up. So it was a bit of a surprise at the time. And unfortunately, I had to kind of step in and, make do the best that I could.
And at the time of the auditing, or after that audit, did you take HACCP training?
I did, yeah.
And what does HACCP stand for?
Hazard analysis and critical points.
Now I want to turn to, for the last area that I want to ask you about, focusing on the production of real water. Can you explain to the jury why workers are told not to drink real water directly off the line?
Sure. Basically because the part of the filtration process that the product works through is through ozone. So one of the common ways to treat water or water for bacteria, and basically eliminate the bacteria in the water. And so it's treated with ozone right before it's bottled, which is the standard practice through bottled water manufacturing. And that ozone is harmful for someone to drink directly. And so if you drink a product right after it was dosed with the ozone or right after it was bottled, you would have an upset stomach, not feel very well for a day or two or so. The ozone dissipates out of the product, out of the water. Has a half-life, I believe, about 8 hours. Not an expert, but it's my recollection. So drinking the product right after it's bottled, you'd be basically from that high concentration of ozone.
Are you familiar with this document?
No, not.
How about page 20 of this document? If you see a list of these toxins or poisons identified by the CDC, you've heard of the CDC, correct? Do you see where hydrazine is identified on this list of toxins? Second low line.
Yep, I see it.
Is it fair to say that the test that you performed or that were performed on real water did not include testing hydrazine?
It's my understanding that those tests didn't include.
Did or did not?
Did not.
Thank you very much. Another question. Is it fair to say that hydrazine was found in the real water concentrate?
I was made aware of it after a certain time. I was asked, actually went through my depositions, I found out that it was gone.
And so from roughly 2008, when you began working there, until 2020, real water never tested for hydrazine, right?
No.
Thank you.
That's it, Charlie.
All right. And I think that's it for the evening, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. And okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're done for the day, and I have to go ahead and give you the admonishment. You're admonished not to converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject matter connected with this trial, or to read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial by any persons connected with this case, or by any medium of information, including without limitations, newspaper, television, radio. Remember the social media prohibition, or to form or express any opinion on any subject matter connected with this trial until the cause is finally submitted to you. And get here by 10:15 tomorrow.
All right, so report to the
Decent cross-examination.
Thank you, sir.
So, Your Honor,
Yeah,
by
yeah,
10:15, you mean 10:30. Learning.
That's right. I mean, I do have a long motion calendar, but I figure if they get here by 10:15, they'll be ready to go by 10:30.
You're dead on for lunch, you get that right.
Right, exactly. Anything else right now?
The two citations from Dr. Alsina and Mr., we're going to put it on the screen, and we need a quick ruling from the court on these two questions.
Yeah, we had something like 40-plus objections. We've narrowed down to 2, Your Honor, so if we can...
Well, thank you for doing that.
Do you want to do that now, Your Honor?
I think it's better, Your Honor, just because we have to edit it overnight.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to address those to begin with. May I approach just to hand you the
Yes, you
deposition
can.
sheets? Thank you. And I'm handing him 68, 69, and 72. It's the only copy I had. What do you do? 68, 69, and 72.
Hey, Tyler,
Okay.
I have these ones, they're a little bit bigger. It's up to you.
No, I think larger is better. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So, Your Honor, the first issue, which is on page 68 and 69, relates to Dr. Alsina being asked questions by plaintiffs regarding life expectancy after a liver transplant. It's our position that this line of questioning...
And for the record, who's Dr. Alsina?
Oh, fair point. He's defense's medical expert, Your Honor. It's our position that these questions, one, it's cumulative, we already have this testimony in. It's also irrelevant. No doctor, whether a treating provider or a retained expert, has ever opined that Ms. King is likely to need a transplant in the future. It's also unduly prejudicial, as it creates the impression that there is a question of fact as to whether a transplant is needed, and no such opinion has been introduced in this case. So as it relates to that line of questioning, which again, 68 onto page 69, we would ask that that be excluded. Then for page 72, there's a question about who should bear the risk of the emotional harm of a future relapse or transplant. Again, part of that question is irrelevant, as there is no testimony that more likely than not, Ms. King will require a transplant in the future. This testimony also calls for a legal conclusion that he's not qualified to give. Whose obligation it is to pay for emotional harm would come from a jury instruction from this court, not from a medical doctor that was a retained expert. And even if it were relevant, it's just something he's not qualified to provide. It also calls for speculation. We'd also argue that it is a call for jury nullification, that the court or that the jury shouldn't be paying attention to the law, but the opinions on the law from a medical provider. And again, we view it as prejudicial, and we would ask for its exclusion. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
First of all, Your Honor, I think there has to be context what counsel didn't bother to do. And so I'm going to hand you the transcript that has the full transcript of the cross-examination of Dr. Alsina. Specifically, what's important is what is, for context, is what's located, takes place on page 65 and 67, Your Honor. And so, if you look at page 65, Your Honor, you'll see that I asked on lines 10 through 14, with no objection, I asked Dr. Alsina, okay, all right, and finally, Dr. Alsina, because of Lisa's autoimmune hepatitis, you cannot rule out that Lisa may have a relapse in the future, correct? I can't. I mean, I cannot. And then on page 67, I ask him, isn't it true that you cannot rule out in the future that Lisa could possibly have require a liver transplant, correct? Now, the defense is not objecting to either of these two questions and answer, Your Honor. So when you get to the question on 68, which talks about the life expectancy, and of course we have two different opinions. We have an opinion from Dr. Hudson where he said 12 to 13 years. We have some literature that, granted it's 6 years old, that that says it's 11.1 or 2 years. And then we have Dr. Alsina, who is basically offering the opinion. I think what he said was like 12 to 15 years. So if you look at what I've offered to do to take out a lot of this is just have him play to the jury the question on 9 through 11. Now, are you aware that Dr. Hudson testified under oath that is the median survival after liver transplant is 12 to 13 years, and then just yes, including there's different data. And then we would go down to the last part, the second sentence, and starting on line 23. But I think it's okay, 12 to 15 years, and then we would go to the next page, page 69. So we can agree on 12 to 15, right? Answer, yes. So we have, and I would point out that under the law, cross-examination is governed by NRS 50. In fact, let me have this. I'm going to give the judge, Your Honor, a copy of this trial brief. Thank you. The record reflects I just served counsel with a copy as well. But cross-examination is governed by NRS 50.1152, which provides that cross-examination is limited to the subject matter of the direct examination, matters affecting the credibility of the witness. It is a fundamental principle in our jurisprudence to allow the opposing party to explore and challenge through cross-examination the basis of an expert's opinion. The rules of evidence in Nevada, particularly NRS 50.275 and NRS 50.25, provide a framework for the qualification and cross-examination of expert witnesses. Here, we are permitted to properly cross Dr. Alsina about every aspect of his opinion and the foundation of his opinion.
That's out of Williams.
Out of Williams. Since defendant's medical expert was cross-examined rather than the plaintiff's, the Williams standards do not apply here. The distinction between offering an affirmative alternative causation theory and questioning whether an expert properly considered and ruled out all other possible causes is critical. While Williams requires a defense expert to establish alternative causes to a reasonable degree of medical probability when offering their own causation theories, it places no such burden on plaintiffs during cross-examination of defense experts. Plaintiff's counsel is not presenting an alternative theory, but rather testing the completeness and reliability of Dr. Alsina's opinions. So for these reasons, the objections are not proper. They're not objecting to the fact that he can't rule out that she may have a relapse because of her autoimmune hepatitis. And there's evidence in this case from Dr. Hudson through the literature that she has a more likely than not higher than 50% chance of having a relapse. And if she has a relapse, there is a risk that she could end up having a liver transplant. The same thing goes for Andrea Bourdonnais, Your Honor. So us asking him what the life expectancy is after liver practice is clearly relevant here, particularly when you go to page 72, their second objection. Because this isn't talking about expenses for a liver transplant. It says, hypothetically, if Lisa were to relapse in the future and require a liver transplant, from a fairness standpoint, do you think Lisa should have to bear the risk of that mental worry and burden and likely exacerbation of her post-traumatic stress disorder and the sorrow of a shortened life and all that brings with it? And he says, I don't think it should be her. And I follow up, you don't think it should be her, right? Right. This goes directly to her emotional distress and her PTSD claim, something else that she has to worry about. We didn't say how much is the liver transplant going to cost, what's the recovery time going to be there? You know, what's the risk of her dying on the table? But the fact is, if it happens, what she has to worry about, clearly has to worry about, all of these people have to worry about, goes to their emotional distress and post-traumatic stress disorder, which the defendants have stipulated to that she has and that she's been diagnosed and is currently suffering from, Your Honor. So under those bases, these questions are clearly relevant and not improper here.
And just quickly as a follow-up, Your Honor, I did not hear any response to the fact that there is not a medical opinion from any treating provider or expert in this case that more likely than not, Ms. King or Ms. Bordenave will require a liver transplant in the future. So our first objection, the relevance argument, still stands. As it relates to the second, I did not hear any response whatsoever to the issue that question calls for a legal conclusion that a medical expert cannot provide. Who bears the risk of emotional harm is a question of law for this court to determine, not defense's retained medical expert. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Your Honor, this particular witness treats and does liver transplants for a living. That is his specialty, the defense expert. And so first of all, with respect, it doesn't go, and we're not required to have an expert that says she's absolutely, definitively, or even more likely than not going to have her liver transplant. That still doesn't take away the emotional distress and the anxiety and the PTSD because it's a possibility. And all I'm asking about here is, do you think, and so this goes directly to the damages for her psychological injuries, PTSD, do you think she should bear that, or do you think she should not? And he says she should not. And so for those reasons, this is clearly relevant, Your Honor, and appropriate under these circumstances. And we don't have to have an expert for that to say she is going to have it to a reasonable degree of probability.
And as this is my motion, I'll get the last word.
Of course, because I'm going to have questions eventually.
Say that again, Pilot.
I'll have questions eventually.
Okay. Well, I'll actually defer to you. Do you have some questions you'd like us to respond to?
Well, yeah, I'm looking at, first and foremost, as we look to page 67 and going to line 9. And here's a question, quote, isn't it true that you cannot rule out in the future that Lisa could possibly have a requiring a liver transplant, correct? And the doctor responded at line 13, I cannot rule it out. Now here's my question, and this goes to one of the issues raised in the Williams case. And what I mean by that is this, because remember, it was Justice Hardesty in a case talked about how you can transverse an expert witness. And so, number one, you can offer up an independent alternative causation, right? He says that. The second he says is this, and it goes to plausibility theory. And under the plausibility theory, you can say, okay, this might be one, but you have to accept the plaintiff's causation theory under plausibility. And then the third, he talks about cross-examination of an expert. And so when I look at this, and I'm looking at it through that lens, is this the type of cross-examination that Justice Hardesty was talking about in the Williams case? Because what he said is clear. And this is cross-examination of the expert. Isn't it true you can't rule out the future that Lisa could possibly have a liver transplant, requiring liver transplant, correct? And here's my point. There's a difference between making a claim, right? They're not making a claim for a liver transplant, but when it comes to things that he could rule out, he admitted he can't rule out a liver transplant. So what do I do with that under the Williams trilogy, right? And that's probably the best way to say it. Under the Williams trilogy, independent alternative causation, plausibility theory, where you accept the plaintiff's theory. You don't have to opine to a reasonable degree of medical probability, but you have to accept theirs and offer up another. But there still has to be a foundation for it, right? And then last but not least, cross-examination. That's my question.
Well, Your Honor, the problem is no one is saying that she needs a liver transplant. There's no opinion from any medical provider at all in this case that she
Okay.
will require a transplant in the
Then
future.
why do they have the cross-examination as the third example in Williams? Because remember, if that's the case, then done, there's no cross-examination, you're done, right?
Well, Your Honor, I actually think the Moriscato case is on point for this particular issue, and in that
Well,
case-
Moriscato came after, Williams came after Moriscato.
Correct, and it
And
didn't overturn
Moriscato,
it.
what was the thrust of Moriscato? Exercising medical judgment, right? And that was Randall Jones's case in front of Judge Earl. It's funny, I remember all the players in these things for some reason. I can't tell you why.
Yes, you
but I
do, Your Honor.
But Moriscato is really a different issue because it's not like they're not making claims for a liver transplant, right? But then we look at this, and I kind of understand the nuance of this in this respect. Yes, but that doesn't mean that's not a real concern for her from a psychological perspective. Because here's the thing about this case, and unfortunately this is where we're at. We have no clue as to what's going to happen in the future. We really and truly don't. And here's my point. And I think I mentioned this a little earlier. We're talking about hydrazine, right? And we understand there's liver, I understand the cirrhosis, I understand the fibrosis, and all those types of things. But circling back, and this is why I think it's kind of important, because there were questions asked. Well, you know, there's no peer-reviewed studies regarding exposure to hydrazine. Well, you know, that'd be unethical to expose somebody to a known toxin like hydrazine. You'd never conduct that test. And the reason why I say that, the earlier preliminary test dealing specifically with hydrazine, the animal testing was so off the charts. They're not going to test hydrazine on people. You know, I mean, not in modern society. Maybe 75 years ago they might do something like that. You know, but looking at this, when he admits he can't rule it out, what do I do with that? Because is that the type of cross-examination Justice Hardesty was talking about in Williams?
And I don't believe it was, Your Honor. And when we look at the Supreme Court's holding, quote, medical experts cannot form an opinion with sufficient certainty so as to make a medical judgment, then there is nothing on the record with which a jury can make a decision with sufficient certainty as to making a legal judgment. This is a mere possibility. It is not a probability. And even as a possibility, allowing this in is highly prejudicial. And when you weigh out the probative value, which is incredibly limited, because all they're saying is, yeah, you can't definitively rule it out. Well, we don't have any expert in this case saying it's going to happen.
Well, here's
What you do have is you have an expert, you have the defense admitting that she has PTSD because of what real water did to her. You have the defense admitting through a stipulation and an order now that she is currently suffering from PTSD, and that's what this is about. I'm not going to get up in my closing argument and argue she should get $800,000 or $900,000 for a future liver transplant. What I'm arguing here is the worry and the anxiety and the PTSD, and that is what the focus is. And he's wrong on Williams, dead wrong. Mr. Kemp and I were the trial lawyers on that case, and I was the appellate court. And I know exactly, and I took Justice Hardesty's questions in that oral argument. So I know exactly what he was thinking, and he's wrong about that.
Well, this is an important distinction to make, the way I look at it. And there's no question when you talk about a plaintiff making a claim for a injury, and if it involves something like, in this case, a liver injury, it's the plaintiff's burden to establish to a reasonable degree of medical probability that this injury was caused by the event. But that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, there's no question. And I think that was one of the issues that came up in Moriscato. right? And Judge Earl didn't quite handle that like he should have. But this is a different issue because you're not making a claim for a liver injury.
Morsicato was the plaintiff's expert, did not, did not offer testimony to a reasonable degree of, or is it either defense expert with an alternative causation theory, did not offer their opinion to a reasonable degree of medical probability. That's not what we have here.
We're not dealing with alternative theories at all. This isn't something that any expert has opined to.
If we were, there's two ways to look at it. This is kind of how I look at it. And I'll just go ahead and bottom line all the cases for you. And this is going back to some of the earlier causation cases back in the 80s. There was a big discussion about whether or not the opinions had to be to a reasonable degree of certainty and or probability. And in Nevada, it's a reasonable degree of probability, the more likely true than not. In fact, I don't know of any jurisdiction that says certainty, number one. But we're talking about the plaintiff's burden of proof in order to establish damages. That's a different issue versus, like in Williams, dealing with cross-examination. And I'm trying to figure out, for example, and when you think about it, if you couldn't ask the questions, you can't rule that out, can you? Once the doctor, the plaintiff's doctor testifies to a reasonable degree of medical probability, that would stand, if that's so rock solid, there'd be no cross-examination. Did you, right? And that's kind of my point here. And they're not making a claim. And so I'm trying to figure out, if they're not making a claim for a liver transplant, why can't you ask, well, you can't rule that out? Because they're not making a claim for it. They're not boarding monies. They're not trying to get a damage claim for a liver transplant.
Well, Your Honor, maybe if I could just refocus what the inquiry here is. We're not just, that's been negotiated, that part's done. We're not arguing over whether he answers that question. The inquiry before the court is
okay,
two
no, but I mean,
issues.
if that's done, then why are we dealing with page 67?
Because those are the issues that are still up as part of our dispute.
So it's not done.
No, I'm sorry. The other piece of testimony that we've already negotiated, whether it's coming in, is done. So what's in front of us is just the time frame on the reduced life of a liver transplant, which again, we maintain is not relevant. And then also the question of who should bear the emotional risk of potential relapse or liver transplant, which again is a legal question. Those are really the discrete issues that are before the court as far as these two pieces of testimony, Your Honor.
Both of those things go to anxiety, Your Honor. I would disagree that that's a legal opinion. It's a moral opinion. In fact, I think I start the question out.
We're on page 72 now?
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor.
In fairness, from a fairness standpoint. So I'm not talking about the law there. I'm talking about fairness and what's right and what's moral. Now, I do understand why real water wouldn't understand that.
Gosh. The ad hominem attacks really don't need to be a part of this case.
Water. I didn't say you, counsel.
Well, who cares what the doctor thinks, who has to bear it? You're going to make that decision, Your Honor.
No, I'm not going to make the decision as from an emotional damage perspective.
You're going to give the legal instruction on it? It's
Right.
not going to be for the doctor to decide.
It's a legal question that he's not competent to answer. But Your Honor,
This goes to her anxiety, Your Honor. Clearly goes to her anxiety and her emotional distress and her diagnosed PTSD, which she clearly testified she has today.
And no one's dispute. We've stipulated to her PTSD. The question of whether the doctor gets to decide who's liable.
Well, you know, ultimately, this is getting very much clear for me. Are you trying to define? I mean, ultimately, it comes down to who's going to define the scope of the PTSD and what the components are, right? Because at the end of the day, there's no damage claim being made for a liver transplant. We can all agree, right?
Correct.
Right? There's no damage claim. There's a damage claim for post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Yes.
And so I'm keeping it in that frame. Because at the end of the day, I'm looking at the question on page 72. They're not talking about a liver transplant. Right?
He says relapse or liver transplant, who would bear the emotional harm for that, the company or Miss King? And again, that goes directly to a legal question, but I think we've beat this dead horse.
I get it, but no, this is a really important point. And the reason why I say that is this. It's my recollection from a testimony perspective, the simple fact that a doctor can opine to a reasonable degree of medical probability that she needs a liver transplant, or more likely true than not, that doesn't somehow cut off her post-traumatic stress disorder claim, because she's concerned about all these things can happen to her. And she has a pretty heavy load right now because she autoimmune.
Myasthenia gravis.
Anyway, I was getting ready to get to that, but she has two issues there, and this is kind of how I've seen this case, and I don't mind telling this, and this isn't meant to be negative in any way. But this is not a soft tissue case, if you understand where I'm going with that. And what I mean by that is this, and I think I might have made that comment. This case, like in a soft tissue case, 6 months, 8 months, or 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, or whatever it might be, at the end of the day, you're going to be 100%. That's kind of how that works. Here's a scenario, and you're trying to say it's unrealistic for her to have a concern as to what's going to happen in the future.
I don't think anyone on the defense side has made that point, Your Honor.
Okay. Then why wouldn't I let this in?
Well, which section of testimony?
I'm talking about where the doctor says, because they go hand in hand. They're connected. The doc says, I can't rule out a liver transplant in the future. And then her concern regarding post-traumatic stress. I mean, that's what the real question's about, really. Sorrow of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and the sorrow of a shortened life, and all that brings with it.
And those are fine arguments for them to make, but asking a medical doctor to opine as to the legal obligation is outside of.
And I just want to make sure, I don't want to cut you off.
I didn't ask him, there's no question there, do you think Real Water should be responsible of this? I
You
just
said
say,
who should bear
ask
the
her,
cost?
she shouldn't bear it.
You said, or the company.
Who's the company?
He says,
It doesn't say company.
it doesn't say company, what are you talking
I
about?
think it was the first time you asked it.
It doesn't say company, not in this question, it doesn't say company. I agreed on the earlier question, I took that out. This doesn't say anything about the company. I say, that brings, do you think she should bear it? I don't think she should. And then I say, you don't think she should be, she should, says be her, but bear it, right? Correct. And so, there's nothing about the company there. I don't say, shouldn't the company bear it?
All right. Anything else on this issue?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right. This is how I see it, and I think we've had I think this is specifically what Justice Hardesty was talking about in the discussion. And I don't remember the exact page, but you can read it. He talks about independent alternative causation theory. He talks about plausibility theory. And then he talks about cross-examination of the expert. And I'm gonna permit it because it goes straight to the issue of cross-examination. There's no claim being made for a liver transplant, but he did say he can't rule it out. If he said, look, that that can't happen at all, 0 probability, it might be a different story, but he said he can't rule it out. And it's nuanced, I get it, but, and then when you look at, this all goes to psychological damages. That's what it does. It really and truly does. Concern, I'm gonna permit it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Judge, last point, just to inform the court, we're pretty close on the jury instructions. We still got a couple of things we're talking about. On the verdict form, I don't think we're gonna be able to come to an agreement, so we're gonna tender our verdict on their verdict form. And the only reason I bring that up now is I think the court might wanna look at it because there's still a possibility we can at least start the closed argument tomorrow.
Interesting. Do we have the proffered instructions? Do I have copies of them? I mean, you're talking about the verdict form.
The verdict form, we're still working on the instructions, Your Honor. I think we're getting close. We might have a dispute on 1 or 2 of them. But the verdict form, I don't think we're gonna get close. So we basically copied the exact same verdict form we used in the last case, which Real Water stipulated to, by the way, in the last case. Theirs is a little bit different. I don't like it for a couple of reasons. I don't want to get into it on the record. But I think the court should have both of them now, or at least in the morning, so you can start scratching your head a little bit about them.
All right. Well, what we can do is this. Do we have copies of them now? You can get to me?
Yeah, I've got copies.
If you don't,
Bonnar's.
as long as I have clean copies,
Yeah, we can leave you a copy of each, Your Honor.
leave me a copy of each. If not, I can have them by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That'll be fine.
Then, Your Honor, we'll have to figure out when you want to hear the argument on the psychological care, our motion.
All right. Tomorrow, I guess. I had no choice. We're close to the end, right?
You sure are.
Yeah, we've got Alcina, I think that's it.
Yeah, Judge, my concern is if you don't get the closing started tomorrow, I think it would be problematic to get it all done and jury deliberate before, we're gonna bring it back next week if you can't get rolling.
How long is Alcina's deposition?
Just shy of 2 hours, Your Honor.
Oh, we'll get it done tomorrow afternoon. So I think it's-
We'll get him in by noon or by the lunch break, I think.
Right.
Yeah, if we can get started at 10:30, we can go to 12:30, and that'd be great.
Yeah, I just don't wanna have to spend all afternoon arguing about verdict forms and jury instructions and not do some of the closing.
Okay, no, we'll get that done within a half hour.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kemp has a good point. I don't think any of us want to be here next Monday. I know my friend Brad.
Thanks, Judge.
And remember, I was the trial judge in Williams. Right?
A lot of the same parties. Thanks for staying late. Apologize for keeping you. Thank you, everyone.
He's gonna help me.
That's all right.
Okay.